Hello. Today I want to talk about President Woodrow Wilson's famous 14 points, one of the most significant policy statements to have been produced during World War I. Here I will merely summarize the text of the statement and hope to be able to discuss the context and consequences in future videos. Even after the United States had joined the Allies in the war against Germany, Wilson continued to emphasize a distinctive American approach to securing peace, most notably in his famous 14 points, which he had devised together with his associate, Colonel E.M. House, and which were announced on the 8th of January 1918 in a speech to a joint session of Congress. Noting the harsh terms which the Central Powers wanted to impose on Russia at the negotiations at Brest-Litovsk, and responding also, it would seem, to V.I. Lenin's peace decree of October 1917, Wilson praised the Russian negotiators for their stated principles of peace and for their insistence on open rather than secret talks. The Russians, that is at this point in time the Bolsheviks, had expressed an honorable, generous and universal vision that had to elicit the admiration of all those who were friends of humanity. They had refused to abandon their ideals or abandon others to pursue their own safety. The Russian people were prostrate before the relentless power and pitiless might of Germany, but their soul remained defiant. By contrast, the representatives of the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria, clearly sought to impose a treaty of domination in which they retained all of their conquests, every province, every city, and which there were no concessions to either Russian sovereignty or the wishes of its peoples. Such surely were the dictates of the militarist minorities that presently controlled these countries, rather than of the more liberal German and Austrian politicians, such as those who had supported the resolutions in the German Reichstag on the 9th of July 1917. Germany and its allies had to make an open statement of their objectives. Surely no statesman could allow the appalling bloodshed of this war to continue unless convinced that such sacrifice was essential for the society and people for whom he spoke. The Russians had asked whether the Americans shared their vision, and indeed the Americans did, hoping that they would be able to assist the Russians to attain liberty and peace. All nations that supported justice and peace in the world would do the same. The United States had only entered the war in response to violations of right by the Central Powers, which threatened the life of the American people. The days of conquest and aggrandizement and of secret treaties were now over. American war demands consisted only of the creation of a world that was safe for every peace-loving nation to live in, able to determine its own institutions, assured of justice in its dealings with other nations, and free from force and selfish aggression. It was necessary to fight, and continue to fight, in order to establish a just and stable peace, and ensure that right prevailed. But for peace to be secure, the chief provocations had to be removed. The Americans shared opposition to the imperialists, seemingly an expression of fellow feeling with the Bolsheviks. The central principle that Wilson wished to emphasize was that of justice to all peoples and nationalities. All had the right to live on equal terms of liberty and safety with each other, whether they be strong or weak. Only a peace based on this principle would endure and provide the means to establish international justice. The American people were willing to devote their lives and energies to this end, which represented a culminating and final war for human liberty. As to Germany, the United States had no jealousy of its greatness, and no wish to block its legitimate influence and power. Germany had in the past achieved great distinction in learning and peaceful enterprise, and as long as it accepted a peace of equality amongst the peaceful peoples of the world, based on covenants of justice, law, and fair dealing, then the United States would not use military or economic power against it. In an evident reference to the idea of greater democratization in Germany, Wilson stated that it was up to the Germans to decide whether to maintain or modify their institutions of government, but they had to decide who their spokesmen were. Were they the Reichstag majority, asking for peace, or the military party, whose men followed a creed of imperial domination? The details of Wilson's program of demands, the 14 points, were as follows. 1. No more secret diplomacy. Diplomacy had to be open to public view, first to secure covenants of peace, and then to determine that future international dealings would be conducted with frankness and openness. There should be no more secret diplomacy, such as Lenin had revealed between Tsarist Russia and the Western Allies. 2. Freedom of navigation. Absolute freedom of navigation across the world's oceans and seas was necessary outside of territorial waters. This would apply in wartime as well as peacetime, except where seas were partly or wholly blocked by international action to enforce international covenants. 3. Equitable trading conditions. As far as it was possible, it was necessary to remove all economic barriers and establish equal trading conditions amongst all nations that had agreed to establish and maintain international peace. 4. Armament reductions. Wilson wanted adequate guarantees of national armament reductions to the lowest levels consistent with domestic safety. 5. Respect for the interests of colonized peoples. A free, open-minded, and absolutely impartial adjustment of all colonial claims was required. This should be based on strict observance of the principle that in the determination of sovereignty, the interests of the colonized people had to be of equal weight with those of would-be colonizers. The next 8 points are more specific. Number 6. The restoration of Russian territory and non-interference in its political development. The evacuation of all Russian territory by the Central Powers and an international agreement that would enable the Russians to independently determine their own political development and national policy was essential. Russia should be able to choose its own political institutions, and whatever they were, its sister nations would welcome her into the Society of Free Nations and assist her in whatever way she needed and desired. The treatment which other countries accorded Russia in the immediate months ahead would constitute the acid test of both these countries' goodwill, their intelligent and unselfish sympathy, and their comprehension of Russia's own needs, as opposed to their own interests. Let me note in passing that the Bolsheviks had only recently come to power in Russia, so this is a significant reaching out to them. 7. The restoration of Belgian territory and sovereignty. The evacuation of Belgium and the restoration of its full sovereignty were essential. More than any other act, this would serve to restore international confidence in the laws which governed international relations. Without this restoration, the whole structure and validity of international law would be permanently impaired. No attempt to limit Belgian sovereignty, such as the idea of a de facto German protectorate, could be allowed. 8. Regarding France. All French territory occupied by the Germans during the present war had to be restored, and, significantly, in addition, so too had the territory seized by Prussia in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71, that's Alsace-Lorraine, a wrong which had been done to France, which had unsettled the peace of the world for nearly 50 years. 9. For Italy. The frontiers of Italy should be readjusted along clearly recognizable lines of nationality. 10. The right of self-determination for the Austro-Hungarian nationalities. The peoples of the Austro-Hungarian Empire should be given the freest opportunity of autonomous development, and their place amongst the nations of the world safeguarded and assured. 11. Independence and peace in the Balkans. All occupied parts of Romania, Serbia and Montenegro had to be evacuated and restored. Also Serbia should be accorded free and secure access to the sea. The interrelations between the various Balkan states should be determined by friendly counsel and along historically established lines of allegiance and nationality, and there should be international guarantees of the political and economic independence and territorial integrity of all these states. 12. The right of self-determination for the Ottoman nationalities and the opening of the straits, that's the waterway between the Black Sea and the Aegean. The Turkish parts of the Ottoman Empire should be assured a secure sovereignty, but the other nationalities presently under Ottoman rule should have the unrestricted opportunity for their own autonomous development. The Dardanelles, and presumably also the Bosphorus, would be permanently opened for ships and commerce of all nations under an international agreement. 13. Polish independence. An independent Polish state should be established, combining all territories that were indisputably inhabited by Poles. It should have free and secure access to the sea, and its political and economic independence and territorial integrity should be guaranteed under an international agreement. Finally, and an essential part of Wilson's thinking, the formation of an international association of nations, what was later to become the League of Nations. A general association of nations had to be formed under specific covenants in order to provide mutual guarantees of political independence and territorial integrity between all states, great and small. Thank you for listening.